Let's talk about autistic self-diagnosis. Hey folks, welcome to the Autistic Adoptee channel. As the channel name suggests, I am both autistic and I am an adoptee. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the question of autistic self-diagnosis and its validity. And this question of the validity of self-diagnosis has been a long-standing topic in the autism community. Many folks, like myself and most of the people that I've interacted with within the autism community, find that or accept that self-diagnosis is both valid and it is affirming, and basically that it's a good thing. Others, however, view it as a form of appropriation, or they see it as a form of attention seeking, or they see it as taking resources away from those who have an official diagnosis. Clearly, I'm a self-diagnosed autistic person, so clearly, as I stated, I find it to be a very valid, self-affirming thing. So why do I think that? Why do I think self-diagnosis is valid? It comes down to 5 basic points for me, I think. The first being resources, what resources you have available to you. And we're going to unpack each one of these topics in a little bit more depth throughout the rest of the video. So the resources, what resources you have available to you. The opportunity, do you even have the opportunity to be able to seek a diagnosis or receive a diagnosis of autism? We're going to talk about the need for a diagnosis. We're going to talk about the risks of having an official diagnosis, and those risks might prevent somebody from seeking one. And the last point is that folks who self-identify, who self-diagnose as autistic, tend to have a very high success rate of receiving a diagnosis should they pursue one later. So let's start with resources. Let's talk about resources. And keep in mind that I am located in the United States. I reside in the United States. I was raised here. I'm an American citizen. I live here. So everything I say is going to be filtered through that lens, but I'm hoping that even if you are not located in the United States, you'll be able to pick out bits and pieces that apply to you or that you resonate with, regardless of your country of residence. So when we're talking about resources, especially in the United States, we're talking about money. We're talking about finances, your financial resources, because an assessment, an autism assessment, can cost anywhere from like $1,500 to $3,000 plus dollars, and that is a significant amount of money to be shelling out, to be paying out of pocket. Most Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and $1,500 to $3,000 is a large ask. It is a significant barrier to seeking an autism assessment. And we do have health insurance in the United States. We don't have an actual legitimate healthcare system. We have health insurance that masquerades as a healthcare system. And I have a lot to say about that, but that's a huge tangent that's not necessarily directly related. But even if you have health insurance, and health insurance is tied to employment most of the time, you can buy it privately. But it is even if you have it, even if you can afford it, even if you're paying for it instead of your employer paying for it as part of your employment benefits. Even if you have health insurance, there's a thing called a deductible. And the deductible is the amount of money that you have to pay towards your medical costs before the health insurance company starts covering your medical expenses. And your deductible can be anywhere from $100 to $8,000 or more, depending on your health insurance plan and the quality of the plan. And of course, better plans with lower deductibles cost more in terms of the monthly premiums you're paying to purchase the health insurance from a private company. It's ridiculous. Anyhow, your deductible can be anywhere from $100 to $8,000 or more. And that means that $1,500 to $3,000 assessment fee, that a cost for an assessment, you might be paying out of pocket, even if you have great insurance, even if you have a health insurance plan. And even if you've met your deductible, let's say you had a car accident, you broke your leg or something, you've already paid $1,500 for your medical expenses in that time period. And and therefore, theoretically, the health insurance company should be covering your medical costs from that point forward. They may, however, still deny your claim, your health insurance claim, to cover the cost of the assessment, because they may deem it to be not medically necessary. I've had medical procedures, not autism assessment, but other medical procedures. I've had them denied by the health insurance company. They refused to pay for it because they deemed it to be medically not necessary, even though my doctor and I thought that it was medically necessary. Otherwise, I would not have had the procedure done. I have been even pre-approved. Like the medical company, the insurance company said, yes, we'll cover this. So I've been pre-approved before the procedure, had the procedure done, and then the insurance company said, we're not going to cover it. That wasn't necessary. So anyways, and in that case, you are paying the cost for the autism assessment out of pocket, regardless, even though you have health insurance. So, financial resources aside, there's also the resource of transportation, what transportation you have available to you, what transportation you can afford. We're back to cost again, based on your location. The majority of assessors, evaluators, diagnosticians, whatever the official term is, I'm not sure, so I'm just going to say assessors. The majority of people who do autism assessments within the United States are located in major metropolitan areas. That means if you live in a rural or a more remote part of the country, you have to arrange for transportation. You have to arrange for lodging if it's going to be an overnight stay. And if it's going to be an overnight stay, you have to arrange for meals. So the transportation and other logistics related to transportation can be a barrier to receiving an autism assessment. And on top of that, on top of those kind of tangible types of resources, transportation and finances, on top of those tangible resources, there's also your emotional resources and your support systems. And what I mean by that is, like, even because I've thought long and hard and I've gone back and forth on whether or not I want to seek an official diagnosis. And that's a lot of emotional energy. That is a huge drain on your emotional resources. And do you have the support systems in place to help support you through that decision-making process. And then if you decide to go through with it, through the support systems to go through the actual process of being assessed. Do you have those support systems available to you? And what if the evaluation, what if the assessment comes back and they say, nope, you do not get an autism diagnosis? That takes an emotional toll as well. And having support systems in place to help you cope and deal with that devastating news, or good news, however you view it. For me, it would be devastating. Having support systems in place, not everybody has that. A lot of autistic people struggle to make and maintain friendships. A lot of autistic people, and in my case, a lot of adoptees as well, are estranged from their family. Their family relationships are strained. And so not having, and in my case, I'm fortunate in one regard, that I'm married, and my partner, we've been married for 26 years, and my wife is an absolute rock. She is my support. She is my support system. But I'm also autistic, and I have trouble making and maintaining friends. So I don't have a large friend support group, and I am estranged from my family. As an adoptee and as an autistic person who always clashed with my adoptive family, I don't have that familial support system in place either. On top of the resources, the financial, the transportation / logistical resources, the support system resources, on top of that, there's also the question of opportunity. For instance, I am 52 years old. Autism was not a diagnosis available in the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, that they use for diagnosing folks. In the DSM until 1980. I was born in 1972. I was adopted in 1974 and came to the United States in 1974. So that's 8 years of my life. The first 8 years of my life, which is when a lot of children today, currently, a lot of children are being diagnosed as autistic within that time frame. It wasn't even possible. It was not even a diagnosis available to me during that time frame when it should have, could have, would have, been diagnosed as a child. So it wasn't even available to me. And then even in 1980, even in the years that followed, it's not like all of a sudden it's in a diagnosis that's available, so everybody who needs that diagnosis is suddenly being assessed and getting that diagnosis. It's one of those things that grows over time. Even Asperger's, and I get that Asperger's is problematic, and I get that it doesn't exist as a diagnosis anymore. It's been rolled into the whole ASD diagnosis. But Asperger's was a diagnosis, but it wasn't available until 1994. And in 1994, I was 22 years old. I just finished college, and I was just starting out into embarking on my IT career. And it wasn't even on my radar. I wasn't even aware of what Asperger's was until many years later. So I never even had the opportunity. There's also the fact that even if like women, even if children are being identified as they need some support, the chances of women, young girls, females, Black, Latino, Asian children being diagnosed is lower than it is for white boys in the United States, because it is seen as a boy diagnosis. That's been the stereotype for a very long time. And that stereotype, even though it's fading, still holds and is still a thing, even though it's less prevalent. Which is why you see so many adult women being diagnosed, adult people of color being diagnosed later in life, because they were completely missed as children because they did not fit the white boy, the white male child who's interested in planes, trains, and automobiles. They didn't fit that stereotype. So the opportunity to be diagnosed was completely missed, right? There's also the fact that that there are a lot of misdiagnoses. No diagnostician, no evaluator, no assessor is going to be 100% perfect. They're going to carry their own biases. They're going to carry their own thoughts and feelings. And people who are autistic are sometimes, and this is especially true for females, are often diagnosed as being borderline personality disorder, or having anxiety, clinical depression. Children of color are, well, it's not, you can't diagnose a child with narcissism, but as they get older, they may be diagnosed with a narcissistic personality disorder instead of autism. So even there's so many missed opportunity chances that surround an autism diagnosis. And then there's just the question of need. Do you need a diagnosis? And I'm not here and I'm not trying at all to castigate or anybody who has an official diagnosis, or say that an official diagnosis isn't necessary. I'm saying that it's not necessary for all people. Because there is absolutely a place and a need for people to have an official diagnosis. And I'm not passing any sort of judgment on anyone seeking or receiving an official diagnosis. I just want to be very clear about that. You might need an official diagnosis if you require accommodations under the Americans with Disability Act, or whatever other legislation or policies cover where you live. So if you require accommodations and supports, official accommodations and supports, yeah, you absolutely need that official diagnosis. And there's also a great deal, and this is a need that I struggle with. There's a great deal of validation in having somebody in a position of authority acknowledge, yes, this is why you struggle. This is why your life has been harder than it should be. This is why you don't understand social situations. This is why your brain can fixate on this one thing and you get stuck. This is why, having somebody in a position of authority. So I'll be honest, that sort of external validation from someone in authority is appealing to me. And it is one of the reasons why I've considered pursuing an official diagnosis. So whether or not there's actually a need there, that's another factor in why self-diagnosis is valid. If you don't actually need the diagnosis, the official diagnosis, when you combine it with the costs associated and everything else, it may not be worth it to you. And another factor to consider is the risks associated with having an official diagnosis. There is still a stigma around autism, and there is discrimination based on autism. Autism is used as an insult, as a slur. It's often used in the same way that the R slur is, calling somebody the rest, right? It's often used in the same way. A new term that I've been hearing is people calling each other acoustic instead of calling them autistic. I play guitar, and so I always think of acoustic guitars. But there is a definite stigma and negative perception attached to autism. So having that official diagnosis on your medical record, you could, and you don't have to share your official diagnosis with anyone, But even within the medical community, there's discrimination. For instance, there have been instances of autistic people getting do not resuscitate orders without asking for them. And a do not resuscitate order is a valid thing, and it is something that if I were ever in a vegetative state, I would probably have a do not resuscitate order in place. So if my heart suddenly stopped and I was in a vegetative state, don't go through the expense and the effort of trying to bring me back just to continue to live on in a vegetative state. I want to spare my partner the agony of living with me in that state. So if I pass, let me pass, right? Do not resuscitate. But that is a voluntary choice that I have made. That is an autonomous choice. I have used my self-autonomy to make that choice, right? But there are autistic people who have received do not resuscitate orders from doctors, and when they have not asked for it. There's been discrimination in terms of organ transplants, in terms of receiving an organ transplant, and people, autistic folks, not receiving, not being prioritized for organ transplants. There are 8 states in the United States that actually keep registries of autistic people. And that brings up all sorts of fears around eugenics and everything else. But you get an official diagnosis of autism and you are now on a government list. I mean, how ridiculous is that? If you have a diagnosis of autism, you're barred from serving in the military in the United States. I enlisted when I was 17. If I had received an autism diagnosis as a child, that would not have been possible for me. And some autistic people have been placed in medical or financial conservatorship, which means that a court deems you to be incompetent to make medical or financial decisions. And so they appoint a guardian who will make those medical and financial decisions for you, which is just gross. It's gross and insulting. And on top of that, an assessment, a diagnosis of autism can be used against you in legal proceedings. If you're ever, heaven forbid, arrested for a crime, it can be used as evidence against you. They have impaired thinking, and so they're guilty of this crime. They committed this crime because they have impaired thinking, because if you are going through a divorce, and there's a question of child custody, your autistic diagnosis, your autism diagnosis can be used to deny you child custody of your children. So it can be used against you in legal proceedings as well. And then there's also the fact that you seek an assessment and then the assessor gets the evaluation wrong. You can search YouTube. There are tons of people who, in their quest for an autism diagnosis, have been told that they're too good at communication. And in my case, I spent 25 plus years in corporate America. I had a very successful IT career. I taught public speaking at a local technical college. I taught public speaking in seminars at work as part of my professional responsibilities, at public speaking, other leadership skills. So the chance that I might be told that I'm too good at communicating, you meet all this criteria, but you're too good at communicating. Or you meet all of this criteria, but you're too good at eye contact to be considered autistic. And I'm not good at eye contact. I suck at it. I'm hearing impaired. I have bilateral hearing loss, more in my right side, but I'm hearing impaired. So I stare at people's mouths and I watch their mouths move, because that visual input even if I'm having trouble processing the pure sound of their voice or the words that they're making, watching their lips helps me process what they're saying. So I stare at people's lips, and that's mistaken for eye contact. Or I stare at the center of their forehead. I'm actually looking slightly up, not at their eyes, because if I'm looking at their eyes, I'm not really listening to them. I'm focused on maintaining eye contact because it's the socially correct thing to do. And I'm focused on, am I doing it right? Oh my God, am I staring too hard? Am I making them uncomfortable? I'm making me uncomfortable. And it actually starts to get really cringy and painful feeling inside, and I'm not listening to what they're saying. So, but I might be told that I'm too good at eye contact because I've developed strategies around it by looking at the lips or looking at the center of the forehead. Marital status. I've been married for 26 years. I might be denied an autism diagnosis because, autistic people clearly can't make and maintain relationships, and you've been married for 26 years. And my, and my career, like I just mentioned, 25 plus years in corporate America in the IT field. Well, autistic people certainly can't hold a job. All these negative stereotypes, all these stigmas around what autism looks like, that people carry, their own biases, their own perceptions that they carry in their heads. The evaluator, the assessor, might get your assessment wrong, and then you're out $1,500 to $3,000 for nothing. And so that's a significant risk in pursuing an official diagnosis. Race and gender also, as I already alluded to, that females tend to be overlooked in autism diagnoses, and so do people of color, right? And my last point here is that there's a fairly high success rate for people who are self-diagnosed or self-identify as autistic, and then they choose later to seek an official diagnosis. There's a fairly high success rate of them receiving that diagnosis. And the reason for this is kind of, it's kind of right there in front of us. People who are not autistic, holistic people, neurotypical people, generally don't sit around researching autism and wondering if this could explain why they've struggled their entire life. People, they just, it's the same thing as like people who are heterosexual do not sit around tend not to sit around questioning their sexuality. They don't sit around wondering if they're gay or lesbian. Just like people who are cisgendered don't sit around questioning whether or not they are living with the wrong plumbing, if they are living in the wrong type of body, if they're actually a male or if they're actually a female or vice versa or whatever. They don't sit around wondering if they're trans or non-binary. People who fit society's quote unquote norms and don't sit around questioning if they actually live outside of those norms. So autistic, non-autistic, if you're sitting around and you're researching autism, you're going down that rabbit hole of YouTube channels, YouTube videos, web pages, Reddit threads, etc., etc., etc. If you're doing all of that, chances are you're autistic, right? Holistic people it doesn't even like ping their radar. In the same way, like if you're mixed race, if you're not mixed race, you're not going to sit around questioning your racial identity, right? So it's a very in your face type of answer. The reason why there's a fairly high success rate for self-diagnosis is because you're not really questioning it. Okay, so what are the benefits of self-diagnosis? There are a lot of benefits associated with self-diagnosing. The first and most important one being self-understanding, self-affirmation, that validation, right? Making sense of why you have always felt different from whatever peer group or felt alien in any peer group, right? Being able to understand autistic characteristics and how they do or don't affect you. That's an incredible piece of knowledge. You knowing that you're autistic, knowing that these are sets of autistic characteristics, and you definitely represent X, Y, and Z here out of however many characteristics there are. And now you understand it, right? Being able to understand that, and understanding how they affect you can let you make accommodations for yourself. Not official accommodations, not official supports. But for instance, I carry, I cannot stand the feeling of anything wet or sticky or greasy or oily on my skin, especially on my hands. I cannot stand it. So I carry nitrile gloves with me. Eating with, like, picking up greasy food, and that's the thing, I love eating with my hands, but I can't stand the feeling on my hands that the greasy residue, that, like eating chicken wings or whatever. I can't stand the mess, I can't stand the feeling. So I've given myself permission to carry nitrile gloves, and now when I'm eating a burger, I'm wearing a glove. I go to a fancy restaurant and if I have to pick something up and touch food, I'm putting on a glove, and I'm giving myself permission to accommodate that need, because I understand it is not because I have an ick and it grosses me out and I'm being a baby about it. It's because that sensory issue, that overstimulation, that fixation that I get, and I can't get that feeling off of my hands, and I've given myself permission to honor it and accommodate it with a glove, even in a fancy restaurant. Now, I'm still working on the self-consciousness. I find myself looking around, seeing if anybody's giving me weird looks for wearing a glove. I still sort of have to hide my hand under the table if the server comes by to ask, or to bring something, or to ask if we need anything else or whatever. But just the fact that I'm like, I'm going to carry gloves in my pocket and I'm going to put them on if I need them. That's a huge accommodation that I've made for myself. Clothing. I have 2 of these gray sweatshirts, and I wear this uniform of gray sweatshirts and black sweatpants almost every day. I have bamboo undershirts and bamboo underwear that feel incredible on the skin. They are the most comfortable clothing I've ever found, that does not trip and trigger my sensory overload from so I've given myself permission to wear the same freaking outfit almost every day. And if I have to go out in public and I have to dress a certain way, I still have the bamboo underlayer, the bamboo cloth underlayer. That's, I've given myself permission to always to wear the same freaking thing all the time, because it feels right, or at the very least doesn't trigger that sensory overload. So self-diagnosis is really beneficial in terms of giving yourself permission to do the things that you need to do. It empowers you to self-advocate, to be able to say, you know what, hold on a second, I'm autistic, and here's how I'm going to experience this situation. So what can we do to make it either easier on me or easier on you, or hopefully both? To be able to advocate for yourself and having the language and understanding to be able to do that, that's a hugely powerful thing, right? And it can help you to arrange informal supports, not formal accommodations, but informal supports, like having friends who you can talk to openly and freely about how you're experiencing the world, and because you've talked to them about your self-diagnosis, and because you've talked to them about autism and helped them understand more about it and alleviate some of the biases or whatever that they have, it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference to be able to share who you are with others. So arranging those informal supports, and so that my partner, my wife, she jokes that she is my social shield. When we go out, she is my social buffer, right? An informal support. Downtime, I'm going back to giving yourself accommodations, being able to accommodate my need to shut down because I get so burnt out, right? I spent my entire adult working life before I retired totally burnt out every day. My career was soul sucking. It was successful, but it was draining me and it wrecked me. Being able to honor my special interests versus productivity. In the United States, we're judged by how productive we are and how many things we're doing and blah, 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 as opposed to hyper-focusing on a special interest. Being able to honor special interests versus productivity. And then there's also just a feeling of belonging. You finally feel like you belong to a community. I can look at even if I'm not interacting with them personally, one-on-one or in a group setting or whatever, I can watch a video from an autistic content creator, and be like, oh, I feel that. I'm so glad I'm not the only one who feels that. You have this sense of belonging to a community. So there are a lot of benefits to self-diagnosis. And so my final thoughts around this are to address the naysayers, the ones who say that it's appropriation, attention seeking, that it steals resources from other people. In terms of it being like a form of attention seeking, quite bluntly, are you crazy? That makes zero sense that somebody would self-diagnose to seek attention. Being autistic is hard. And I'm not, and I want to be clear about this. It's not hard because being autistic sucks or anything like that. It's hard because of the way society is structured. Trying to navigate an holistic world as an autistic person is hard. You're navigating a world that is not built for us. You're navigating a world where holistic people instantly distrust, discriminate, look down upon, judge, etc. Being autistic is hard. And so choosing autism, choosing a life that's hard, that's not a thing. People don't choose this path to seek attention, because the only attention you're going to get is incredibly negative. And anyhow, you get what I'm saying. I don't want to overstate it, and I don't want it to make it sound like autism sucks, because I actually really enjoy being autistic. I enjoy my autism. I do not enjoy having to navigate society as an autistic person. I do not enjoy the negative feedback that's reflected back at me. So anyways, and in terms of it being a form of appropriation or that it's stealing resources from people with an official diagnosis, that's also a very in-your-face type of answer. In order to receive official supports, accommodations, benefits, in order to get that disability check, in order to get that extra time on a test in school, or being able to take tests verbally, or being able to take or whatever accommodations it is, in order to get those official accommodations, those official benefits, and those official supports, you need an official diagnosis. We're not stealing anything from anyone. Period. we're not appropriating some benefit. Without the official diagnosis, there is no official support. We're not taking anything away from the people with an official diagnosis who needs that official support. Period. Anyhow, sorry, I got a little ranty at the end there. And that's what I'm hoping is that you can take maybe, I'll tell you that when I first realized that I was autistic in my late 40s, I don't remember exactly when, it was like 47, 48, something like that. When I realized that I was autistic, this information, this perspective that self-diagnosis is valid, healing, and affirming would have helped me a lot. And I really wish that I'd had that up front. So I'm hoping that maybe somebody who's at that point in their journey, just discovering that they may be autistic and just discovering more about autism, I'm hoping that they might hear this and know that if they end up self-identifying as autistic, self-diagnosing as autistic, that it is a healthy thing to do, that it is a valid thing to do, that it is self-affirming, that it can give you confidence that you didn't have before. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Well, no, there's actually a lot more I could say. But anyways, thanks for hanging out with me, folks. If you made it this far, please click like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about self-diagnosis and its validity. Hey folks, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, remember to drop a like and leave a comment or a question down below. If you're new here, subscribe and ring the notification bell for more content like this. Until the next video, keep living your best life and know that you deserve it.